Alright, so I'm getting this video out a little bit late. It's the end of October 2023 as I'm posting this, but I want to talk about Paw Paw trees. So if you're not familiar with Paw Paw, it's a native tree to much of the East Coast, and it produces a very large fruit at the end of the season. Typically September and October is when they ripen. They're often green in color. This is what they look like. And the taste of the fruit can vary significantly from tree to tree. A lot of people describe it as kind of a mix of a mango and banana going on. The texture is almost avocado-like. You can kind of see here I'm cutting into a fruit. They have very large seeds. It's a very tropical flavor going on, and every other member of this family of tree is from a tropical climate. It's the only member of its family that can occur in cold, temperate climates like the East Coast of the United States. They're often found near water, and they are a fairly common tree. They're not rare, although they're not super well known, and so they kind of go unnoticed in the woods very often. But if you're looking for Paw Paw in the wild, trying to forage or find trees near you, like I said, they like water. They don't have to be right up next to the creek or the river, but typically if you find a body of water and you kind of walk nearby it, and, if you walk far enough, you'll find some pawpaws. The fruit, you don't see them in the grocery store, and this is largely due to the fact that the fruit are only good when they are very, very ripe, and they do not have a long shelf life. And so you just saw me shaking that tree. That's commonly the way that pawpaw are harvested. You either pick up the fruit on the ground or you give the tree a gentle shake, and that's how you know they're ripe. You don't want to pick them early. Right here we're in a grove of pawpaws. You can see some of the larger ones. They max out typically around 8 inches in diameter and maybe 30 or so feet tall, and they form these dense thickets like this by sending out lots of root suckers. So if you find a pawpaw thicket, it's very likely that all of those trees are a clone of one original seedling, which is important to note because to get good fruit production, you actually need multiple, at least 2 different trees to get good pollination, right? So if you're trying to grow pawpaws, which I do a lot of, there's some things to consider with the seeds. The seeds do not like to dry out, so you want to either plant them immediately and mulch them, or you want to put them in some sort of situation where you can cold stratify them and keep them moist. Do not let the seeds dry out. You can see here I'm mashing up a bunch of fruit to get the seeds out, and this was all rotten fruit at the end of the season that I got from a local farm. It would normally be pig food, but I paid them like $20 for a big bucket of fruit, and then I get all the seeds. And I'm just storing all of the fruit pulp in a bucket with holes drilled in it and some wood chips mixed in, and I'm going to store that until sometime, in the winter, whenever I can get some space to plant the trees. I'll just spread all that wood chip pulpy seed mix out over a bed, probably an air-prune bed, because pawpaws have a very deep taproot that you don't want to damage when you're transplanting them. So I like to grow them in air pruning beds. I've got some videos on air pruning beds. If you don't know what that is, you can check those out, or there's lots of other content on the internet around air pruning beds. But yeah, overall, pawpaw is a really cool native fruit. The other important thing to note about pawpaws, they can grow really well in the shade. You will get better fruit production in the sun, but they can put on a crop in the shade. They're shade tolerant. They do like life in the sun, but they're shade tolerant. You can see some more of the seeds here. I'm scooping out some pulp to put in the freezer for later. Anyway, if you're interested in pawpaw and you're on the East Coast, you can buy trees from many nurseries, including myself. I do sell some trees. You can buy seeds sometimes from people. If you go to farmers market during September and October, you can sometimes actually find pawpaw fruits for sale. There has been a little bit of modern breeding work to both find in the wild and breed cultivars that have, important qualities such as larger fruit or fewer amount of seeds in the fruit, that sort of thing. So if you're into grafting, you can certainly get grafted pawpaws of specific cultivars. What I like to do is try to get seed from specific cultivars. That way there's some adaptability and more genetic diversity in the crop. Pawpaws come somewhat true to seed. They're often very similar to their parents, and as I stated before, there's a lot of variability in the wild pawpaw genetics. You can see I'm filtering through some pawpaw seedlings that I grew here. If you go in the wild, every tree is going to taste different. Some are going to taste amazing. Some are not going to taste that good. Some are going to be big fruit, some small. There's a lot of variability, and so there's a lot of value to getting out there and exploring your local environment and seeing what you can find. You might find a really good one. You might find some seed that's really well adapted to your region. Now, I mentioned, like I said, some modern breeding work and variety selection, and I think it's important to consider with pawpaw and really with any other native food source that the gene pool that is available to us today in modern times, in modern breeding efforts, is very heavily shaped by thousands of years of work done by indigenous cultures who would have been living in the range of the Paw Paw. And so I'm not from one of these cultures, and so I cannot speak to specific traditions, but I know many, if not all, of the cultures that lived in the Paw Paw's range would have had very meaningful relationships with these trees. They would have cared for them, they would have likely planted them, and specifically, cared for trees that were very valuable to them, right? Trees that may have had larger fruits or different flavors or things of that sort. And so, when we go out in the wild and we find a superior tree or we do breeding work, we're riding on the back of thousands of years of work. So I think it's important to consider, that we would not have the pawpaw trees that we have today if it were not for all of those people and the ways that they related to and worked with these trees. But anyway, that's just a little bit about Paw Paw, and if you want to play with this tree, you've got time to plant trees for next year, you've got time to find some trees to get ready to forage next season. Like I said, it's a little bit past their prime right now, so you probably won't be able to find any fruits out in the wild, but you can still go and locate and identify the trees and be ready to come back next year when they're ripe.